Hello. Hi, everyone. Hello, Stefan. How are you?
Hey, good to meet you, Angela. I'm doing well. How are you?
Great to see you. Really, really excited to have you here. You've done an AMA with us before in the past, haven't you?
Yeah. I think it was a couple of months ago. Happy to be
Months
back.
ago. I thought it was last year. But
Probably was last year. My sense of time
um,
is screwed. Like, could be.
that's that's absolutely fine. But yeah, no. Regardless, really, really happy to have you back, especially because we've just finished the Gnosis Chain hackathon, of course, and I'm sure a lot of the people in our audience at the moment are the hackers from the hackathon and are excited to be able to speak with you and hear what you have to say. Yeah, so I guess let's just kind of dive right in then. So from the last AMA, I saw that you had been in the crypto space for quite a long time, right? Since I think you mentioned like even before Ethereum was really a thing. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience in terms of how you feel the landscape has changed since you first started out?
Oh, well, yeah, no, it entirely changed, of course. I guess when we started working on Bitcoin, hardly anyone knew about Bitcoin. And I think most of the people that knew about Bitcoin thought it was a scam. And it definitely was extremely early. At that time, there was hardly any application available, even for Bitcoin. With some gambling sites, some sites even paid you in Bitcoin for watching advertisement. But there was generally like the landscape was very, very tiny, and there was not much going on. And I think for a long time there was actually nothing really revolutionary. There were like a couple of new projects in the blockchain space, like Mastercoin and Colorcoin and those kind of Litecoin, like basically very small variations of Bitcoin. And then only with Ethereum, it was kind of obvious it's like actually a fundamental change that will allow to do much more sophisticated things. And that was also true for us. We previously built an application for Bitcoin that accepted basically Bitcoin as currency. And then turned out that we could build the same application, but much more decentralized using Ethereum. And with Ethereum, obviously, there was this massive boom of new applications being built. The ICO craziness happened. That was something we also participated in. And I think now it's completely different. Like there's so many things happening that it's really impossible to keep really an overview of what's going on. I remember like DEFCON 1, you knew basically everyone yourself personally. And this was also true, I would say, until I guess DEFCON in Osaka in Japan 2000, I guess 18 or 19. And after this, with the last bull run, the entire space exploded. And at this point, you feel like you hardly know anyone anymore because in every single niche there's so many projects. And I think at this point probably it's even too many at some point, and I expect actually some consolidation in the space happening over the next couple of years. Simply because we don't need like I don't know hundreds of different wallet implementations, and we don't need hundreds of different exchanges and lending protocols. But I guess that's something that we're going to see in the next couple of years. And I guess now we have, especially in the last couple of months, we entered a kind of also new stage. There are other technologies making significant progress, like AI. And I think now it's very interesting for us to understand how can we combine AI with Web3. In some sense, AI is also almost like a competition for Web3 in terms of talent and capital. But I think there are many interesting ways how we can potentially combine those two.
Fantastic. I was actually going to ask you about that later on as well, but leave that for a second, I just wanted to say to the people in our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I can either read them out for you, or if you'd like, I can invite you to the stage to ask Stefan directly. But yeah, so back to the list of questions that I have. I guess starting a bit more basic still, regarding Gnosis Chain, and I saw that you had done a Twitter thread on this as well. A lot of people confuse it with an L2. Do you want to say in your own words why that isn't the case?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So Gnosis Chain historically was xDai. So it's not a completely new chain. Actually, it's the oldest side chain to Ethereum, older than Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, and such. And of course, there are lots of different layer 2s right now operating, but we see actually a demand for increasing layer 1 space, specifically layer 1 space, which is also actually decentralized. So if you look at the different networks currently operating, then you will see that Ethereum always runs at capacity. And that also puts a limit or cost for the layer 2s operating on top of Ethereum, because obviously it's a fee market. The more demand there is, the higher the price is. And that's why also even for layer 2s, it's actually not cheap to operate even today on Ethereum. And of course, there are updates on the roadmap of Ethereum to make it cheaper, like product sharding, for example. But the state today is like it's actually quite expensive to do even simple transactions on layer 2. And that's why we see there's actually demand for having more layer 1 space where more layer 2s can also operate on top. At the same time, obviously, there's a lot of different like Ethereum competitors. However, none of them is actually really decentralized. Instead, all of them are focusing more on the property of scalability. So for every blockchain, we have to make a trade-off in a triangle of properties: decentralized, secure, and scalable. And yeah, pretty much all the competitors, they focus on scalability because that's where they see Ethereum lacking. And Ethereum obviously goes the layer 2 strategy in order to compensate for that. And we are really very much focusing on following Ethereum. So Gnosis Chain is the only other network that follows like exactly the Ethereum roadmap, not only on the EVM level, but also on the general execution and consensus layer. And that also implies that all the benefits that are implemented for Ethereum, like for example, proof-of-stake sharding, which allows more layer 2 capacity, is something that we can also enable on Gnosis Chain. And that is something that just no other network can do. We are also very much focused on building decentralized block space. So we have a very high number of validators. And I think we could argue already today that Ethereum, like Gnosis Chain, is one of the most decentralized networks after Bitcoin and Ethereum, probably the most decentralized. And always, sometimes it's funny, you have to explain like why decentralization matters even to blockchain communities. But we value decentralization very highly because it is the only way you can allow a secure environment for dev developers to operate, and knowing that the applications will actually be available and accessible to everyone also in the future. So there's even today, there is no easy way for someone to take down Gnosis Chain or to take down specific applications or censor specific applications on Gnosis Chain. And we generally are very, very much in favor in developing technologies that advance decentralization. And even on Ethereum, we try to help keeping Ethereum decentralized. We are very, very well aware of the issues that arise with centralized like RPC nodes and ways to generally process blockchain transactions. And so we try to innovate on this level as well.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome that you guys are so focused on that. I think as well in communities, especially people who are maybe newer to the space, they see the word, blockchain, and that comes along with the words decentralized, and everyone assumes that it is because it's meant to be a blockchain, but that isn't necessarily the case always. So yeah, really well put. Yeah, so let's move on to some of the more exciting questions, like about AI. Obviously, AI is so up and coming, especially in this past few months. It's really exploded. What do you see in terms of the future of AI and blockchain coming together?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So it's pretty clear that AI is right now on an exponential growth phase where a lot of developments are happening. ChatGPT just kind of showed where the direction is heading, and it's really remarkable how smart the AI is today. And I think there are many ways that blockchain can be integrated, or like AI can be integrated into blockchain. There's a very interesting project that surfaced shortly after ChatGPT surfaced, which is AutoGPT, and that is a programming library or platform that got a lot of developer attention. And what it allows you to do is to have autonomous agents. And what they can do is they can plug into many existing services in order to use them autonomously. So, for example, you can tell an AI, I would like to do a marketing campaign for a specific product, and here's access to my Twitter account, here's access to YouTube, here's access to an agency that can create videos for you, and so on. You can really give this AI access to act completely autonomously. And then, of course, the AI also has to, pay those agents. Some of them themselves are AIs, so AIs talking to AIs. And in fact, if you want to use this today, you have to register, and they have to add basic credit card details to give access to those to your AI, so it can actually start paying on your behalf. And I think in the future, what we are going to see is that there are many new services which are purely AI driven, and AIs have to, communicate with other AIs. And I think on this level, it would be very interesting to actually do this kind of communication, inter-AI communication, on blockchain, where agents can talk to other agents, they can pay other agents. The output of AIs can also be replicated on chain. There are actually already crypto projects trying to accomplish this. We're actually working also with some of them together to experiment of how this can look like and how the architecture for this can look like. And I think that is definitely like one way AI can be combined with blockchain, to have this neutral, let's say, communication and exchange layer. So the AI doesn't have to rely on centralized sources for this kind of payment and communication. And obviously also an AI, like if you don't necessarily want this AI to be acting on your behalf on your credit card, for example, but rather maybe give it a private key and allow it to interact with this private key. And you can top up the balance with some, I don't know, DAI or USDC or whatever. So I think that's one way. I think the AI can also use blockchain for information retrieval. So this kind of goes back to the very initial beginning of Gnosis. If you look into the original Gnosis white paper, there's even AI referenced. Because we assumed that AI agents could use prediction markets for information retrieval. And the way this works is, so a prediction market is a market where you trade information, and you can plug the information or a prediction market into an autonomous market maker. And this would allow to provide the AI to provide liquidity for everyone to trade on this market. And anyone who has information on the outcome of the event has an incentive to trade on this market if the market doesn't reflect its own belief. So, for example, let's say there's a prediction market on the next presidential election. And let's say there could be the question, will Trump become the next president? The AI might need this information for whatever reason. It could start such a market, it could fund this market, and could allow anyone to participate on this market to trade. And the outcome of this is something that the AI could use to get this to kind of do some further interactions or decide on whatever it had to decide on. I think those are two examples how AI could interact. I think there's also lots of experiments of how generative art can be combined with NFTs. I think that's also very popular right now. So I think there's plenty of connections. And I think I would say right now, it would be the task of, it should be the goal of the Web3 community to go to AI researchers and developers to explain them how blockchain can be leveraged and why it can be leveraged. I think there's a lot of education needed, and you have to make sure those communities can stay close together.
Yes, for sure. I completely agree with that. And another question, I guess, coming from your first point or your first idea about what we could see AI do in blockchain. Do you think that account abstraction is the way to go with AI or not?
So that's for me completely separate topics. In my view, the one doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the other. Account abstraction for me is something that's actually more important for humans because it can increase user experience quite significantly in terms of account recoverability and so on. I assume that anyways, also AIs will probably interact via smart contract accounts, aka like account abstraction. But this is maybe also more for other reasons to set permissions for others. Actually, that's another field where AI could be interesting, to have permission systems where AI can have a say as well. So for example, you could have a DAO where maybe one of the signers in the multisig can be an AI, trying to reason about what's going on and then has to sign off on decisions, for example.
Awesome, cool. I've got some questions in the chat now, just on this topic. I will go back to some of the other questions earlier, but on this topic, Mihir is asking how Gnosis Chain is interfacing with account abstraction, and asks maybe we could have AI agents have limited access to a user's abstracted wallet and execute trades or transactions of their own.
Absolutely, yes. So that's actually a very good example. To answer the first question, obviously the SAFE project is very close to us. There's actually a big budget also associated to or given to Gnosis DAO to foster adoption of SAFE or Gnosis Chain. And the way we enable account abstraction is to have great tooling for all developers to utilize SAFE contracts or Gnosis Chain. And to make it really easy to integrate into applications and relayers and everything else that's required for utilizing account abstraction. We also have our own team at Gnosis, which advances the possibilities of account abstraction through modules and transaction guards. It's kind of hinting to what you were asking in the second question. So yes, indeed, you can with SAFE contracts and our own modules. There's a roles module being published very soon. You can very precisely define what another actor can do on your behalf via your account. And yes, this other actor can be indeed an AI in the future. I guess this will be happening because the AI can be awake 24/7 while you cannot. And I would expect that this is going to happen, that users can plug in an AI. The AI can only do certain interactions with it, so your account is safeguarded, but it can act on your behalf whenever that's needed.
Yeah, that's a super exciting concept for the future, for sure. Kyoto asks, your team has shipped many great projects like CowSwap, SAFE, Gnosis Chain. Which one is next? They're asking, what's the future?
Yeah, it's also a very good question. So we work on a new project, which I think will be very fundamental for Gnosis Chain and hopefully also beyond, because it's actually not only Gnosis Chain focused, and it's called Gnosis Pay. So we're advancing into the world of payments, and it's kind of absurd that today actually no one or hardly anyone's using blockchain for payments, even though if you look at the Bitcoin white paper, it has a title like a peer-to-peer cash system. So it was supposed electronic cash system. So it was actually supposed to be a network used for payments. Today, even the biggest Bitcoin maximalist will agree that Bitcoin is not used for, or like not really useful for payments. I mean, there's Lightning Network, but it has hardly any usage at all, and is also not suited for like global payments. So that being said, today, if you look at the technology that has been built for layer 2s, account abstraction, and all those tools together, we have actually all technologies in order to advance payments to a level that allows to have an equivalent experience, and maybe even better compared to what you have today. The big problem with payments is that there is, of course, a massive existing payment industry. And I think for most part of the globe, you can consider it solved by being monopolized by Visa and MasterCard. And what we realize is if you want to tackle payments, the only way is to build something that's kind of a hybrid solution that allows to talk to the old world and the new world at the same time, a little bit like Skype. So I was one of the first Skype users, and at the beginning, Skype was only for like peer-to-peer Skype calls. And at some point, they added Skype out and Skype in that allowed you to phone out to like regular landlines and also phone in into your like voice over IP line. And today, if you look at phone calls today, they all happen over the internet. So the internet clearly replaced all the old infrastructure. And I think we have to do something similar with payments, where today you have some peer-to-peer payments on chain. We have like 99% of payments happening in Visa, MasterCard and such. And if you ever want to change this balance, then we have to connect those two. And that's exactly what we did. We built the first actually decentralized Visa card. And the way this works is that we integrated a hardware wallet into the Visa card itself. So unfortunately, I don't have one right with me. And it's also not live yet, but it's a hardware wallet that allows to communicate directly with the Visa application on the card itself. If I tap and pay, I'm actually signing a transaction that is settled via the Visa, via the Gnosis Pay network, and also via Visa. So for the merchant, it's the same experience. For the customer, it's the same experience, but it is already settled on blockchain. And well, obviously, it also allows peer-to-peer transfers, and assuming that the merchant has a POS terminal that is enabling like the blockchain transaction directly, then well, you can of course do a direct payment as well. In order to get there, however, you have to first get a significant adoption of the card itself. And that's like a very important project that will come very soon. Maybe we can even combine it with the AI component. You mentioned that, like in the future, potentially AIs will also have to do payments. But for now, we focus on humans.
That makes sense. That's really awesome and so exciting to hear. I think in this most recent Encode and Gnosis Chain hackathon as well, we touched a bit on Gnosis Pay already, and that was so exciting to see, and especially for the hackers to kind of start potentially using it. Okay, so what I will do now, because we've got a bunch of questions that have just come in through the chat. I think everyone's warmed up and has lots to ask. So I'm going to go down slowly. I'll quickly go back to the first question that was asked before I continue. So this was from Jane, and she's asking, why is decentralization important, and what does Gnosis do differently than others? I think you touched a bit on this earlier, but yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's a very good question. And I think there is, first of all, there are not only benefits with decentralization. Let's maybe start with the downsides in infrastructure, because if you decentralize something, it's usually slower. You have to replicate information, so it's also more expensive. So there are quite a lot of downsides to decentralization. And well, the reason why you want to have decentralization is, platform neutrality. And what I mean by this is you're always in danger if you rely on a centralized entity, because obviously this entity has all the means to eventually ban you from the platform. And I think this happens a lot actually in all the existing platforms we are using. Twitter is a nice example. Many people get banned from Twitter for no reason, and there's always outrage if this happens. And this also happens to people that integrate, for example, I don't know, log in with Facebook or log in with Google, that eventually those services decide, well, maybe we don't like your application so much, so we shut it down. Actually, one of our core developers at Gnosis, he works on the core clients. He previously did one of the most successful Facebook games. So he had really literally like millions, 100 millions of users. And then from 1 month to another, Facebook just decided to quit and like stop this application from operating. And well, all his company was basically gone in a very short time. And I think that is a risk that we all face when interfacing with like platforms like this, as individuals, as developers, as companies. And that's the beauty of blockchain, that it is the only platform that actually allows you to have those guarantees of being able to operate. If I deploy a smart contract today on Ethereum, I know it is accessible for everyone, hopefully until eternity. And that's something that just basically no other platform can offer. There's just nothing else. And this obviously depends on how decentralized the network is. So I would say today, the guarantees you have on Ethereum and Bitcoin, you have on no other network. It's got a big difference. I personally would probably not trust any of the other existing networks, because they are mostly owned by VCs, they are mostly owned by very few individuals, or it's just completely intransparent. With Gnosis Chain, therefore, we try to really double down decentralization and incentivize decentralization. So decentralization is not only how many validators are there, because one person can in theory have all the validators. It's also about how many different node operators are there. Are they geographically decentralized? So for example, Ethereum is not really well decentralized in terms of geography. It's mostly run in US and in Europe. And of course, we have seen like regulation taking place in those regions. And there definitely is also a reason to believe that eventually, we saw this with Coinbase, like regulators eventually trying to start regulating the entities running the validators. And that's a big concern, because then they could start enforcing what is included in the blockchain, what's not included. And then this big value of having a neutral network is violated. And that's something we want to prevent. So we started incentive programs to allow many individuals to run their own nodes, and specifically also in regions which are more geographically diversified. So we have a Gnosis VIP program. You can go to gnosisvip.com, I believe. I have to check the domain again. But if you're living in a country where there's no single GNO validator running today, well, we give you a very nice incentive to do so, to start decentralizing the network. And I think no other network has done this to the extent that we have done this. And that's why I would definitely argue that Gnosis Chain is the most, like the third most decentralized network after Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So moving on to the next question, which I think moves on nicely from what you said about location. But this is kind of going away from the US now. So Sarah asks, with the outside movement of a lot of US presence for crypto funds and trading operations, in general regulatory pressure, do you think the interest in crypto is on the down?
No, I would not say so. I mean, obviously, we are still considered to be in a bear market, but that's not what I'm feeling. So I think quite the opposite. There's still a very big activity. Of course, geographically, it might be redistributed in terms of where most activity is happening. I think still US probably leading after Europe and Asia, but potentially it's being a bit shuffled. But I have no indication that interest in crypto is going down. I think maybe interests are shifting slightly or a little bit towards AI, simply because it's a very hot topic. And I think especially people that more recently joined crypto, they are looking more into AI and eventually change their direction. But again, I think there is many ways AI and crypto can be combined, and that's what we should try to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that this kind of moment in time is great for both industries to start really helping each other out and growing together. I personally think there will be a big explosion soon of innovation. But yes, on to the next question, because so many are coming through. I'm going to jump around a bit, everyone in the chat. I hope that's okay. So I thought we would go into an interesting one about stablecoins first. So Toro asks, I'm a bit worried about stablecoins post USDC and the ability of them to withstand small losses in collateral/confidence, as well as the contagion effect of perhaps the USDT crash. Should they be worried? Yeah, what is your opinion on that?
Well, it's a good question. So, like, I think it's definitely the case that you have a little bit of risk when holding holdings even stable coins like USDC and USDT. I think though it's still pretty limited. I personally, I prefer to hold stable coins and DAI, but obviously it did not help much because it was mostly backed by USDC, and it turned out MakerDAO was also not set up to really sufficiently prevent the risk from USDC exposure. So in my view, there's very few that I would like 100% trust. So yeah, I think there's still room for new stablecoins basically that are less exposed to those risks. But I cannot give you any clear recommendation. I guess like if you hold a lot of stablecoins, diversification is the only way. That's also what I personally do. Just don't hold everything in USDT or everything in USDC. Stay definitely away from any like algo stable coins. That's the only advice I can give.
Awesome. Cool. So let's move on to the next question. I am kind of jumping around here. Maybe that's not helping me in regards of being able to pick a next question. But yeah, I think an interesting one would be from Courage. And they said, can you talk about the process by which xDai became Gnosis Chain? It's kind of unusual in crypto to see takeovers.
Right, yeah, it's true. I'm actually surprised myself that there's so few takeovers. And so it dates back a couple of years when we kind of foresaw Ethereum fees will be so expensive that many of the applications cannot be really executed on Ethereum anymore because they're outpriced by other applications. And that's when we started looking into alternatives. So we talked very early on to like Optimism, to Polygon, which at that time was still called Matic, and to xDai and a few others. And at the time, xDai was, in our view, the most advanced sidechain to Ethereum. It had a nice organic growth, and that's why we decided to invest into xDai as well. So it was the first kind of alignment, and we started deploying our applications on xDai. And I think then 1.5 years later, or 2 years later, don't quote me on timelines, as you know, but like sometime later, we then considered merging those two projects. And the reason was that xDai, in our view, was undervalued while it had a very nice community and a lot of interesting activities on the network, including co-op. The network value was very low. And at the same time, I think they also did really nice infrastructure projects like Block Scout, and a lot of things were necessary to operate networks. On the other hand, Gnosis, we had experience in client development because we took over Open Ethereum, previously Parity. And we also are obviously one of the larger application developers. And so we kind of combine expertises here that should allow us to run a thriving ecosystem. And then the concrete merge was a discussion between the two communities, the GNO token holders and the stake token holders. And of course, like the leadership teams of both projects also, we communicated and were drafting of how the merger could concretely look like. And then, in fact, it was a Gnosis DAO proposal that was passed by like a supermajority deciding that this merge should happen. And what, in fact, was done on chain was a swap contract where GNO could be exchanged, stake tokens could be exchanged for GNO at a specific rate. And that was it. There was actually not a single lawyer involved in signing any contract. So it was a pure on-chain merger. And yeah, I think a few years later, or 1 year or 2 years later, we are I think we have accomplished quite a bit. We did one very important event, which was changing the consensus algorithm from proof of authority to proof of stake, Ethereum to proof of stake. That allows us to have a much more decentralized network. And that was a major undertaking, given that, I mean, obviously Ethereum did it first, but they came from different consensus. So we had to actually do some changes. And I think we are probably like one of the few teams that can actually pull this off, because it requires a lot of in-depth knowledge of how Ethereum 2 consensus works. And we are very close to the Ethereum core developers as well that were able to help us and actually partially also work on Gnosis Chain. That was from technical perspective, the biggest change that we implemented.
Cool. That's so awesome to hear. Kind of on a similar, not very similar, but along the same lines. Niraj is asking, how is xDai backed?
Very simple. xDai is a bridged DAI from Ethereum mainnet. So we have the Omni bridge at the it's a bridge currently operated via a multi-signature wallet, with many parties having to sign off on transactions that are passed through. And working on actually very interesting new bridge technology that will ultimately replace Omni bridge, or like the underlying multi-signature technology. But yeah, just to keep it short, yes, so you have DAI on Ethereum mainnet, you bridge it via this xDai bridge, or in this case, actually the xDai bridge, not the Omni bridge, because you have two bridges, one for xDai, Omni bridge for everything else. And yeah, the xDai bridge will mint xDai on Gnosis Chain. And of course, you can always go back to Ethereum mainnet.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, leading on from this, Katie is asking, do you think there is a safer, less frustrating UX option than bridges in the future?
I would say it's even today, so fortunately. So the way I see the native bridges, which are actually really cumbersome to use because they have to be really concerned about security, we have something that I call liquidity protocols. So something like Hop and Connext, and they allow you to very easily go from one network to another. And they work similar to a state channel where capital is locked up on both networks. And when you deposit money on network A, they give you a check that you can take on network 2 to withdraw the same amount of money. And that goes instant at a very, very low cost and very, very great user experience. And in my view, the native bridges, which are so difficult to use, they will only be used to rebalance between those two. Because obviously, if you move a lot of funds in here and you withdraw a lot of funds here, eventually you have to rebalance between those two. And that has to be done, obviously, via the bridges, because the bridges are the only ones that can issue and redeem the natively minted tokens. And yeah, so even today, I would recommend users that want to use Gnosis Chain, just use one of the liquidity protocols. There are also aggregators of bridges. So if you want to bridge anything, for example, to Gnosis Chain, I recommend going to Li.Fi, li.fi. And they have a very interesting aggregator that aggregates all bridges and liquidity protocols. So no matter what you want to do, it will calculate the cheapest way for you to go from token A on network, X, to token B on network Y. And it's very easy to use.
Amazing. There you go, Katie. I can see that they're typing in the chat. I'm not sure if it's in response, but I will move on to the next question. And Katie, if you have something, if you comment, I will read that out in a second. Okay, so let's go on to jumping back a bit. So we had a question from, where is it? Arnie saying, what are the top things that need to happen to unlock the next 100 million users? And we go from early adopters to mainstream. And is Gnosis helping there? I think, yeah. I'll let you answer.
So I wish we would have already 100 million DeFi users. I doubt it, or like decentralized users. On centralized exchanges, certainly yes. On blockchain, my own estimation is maybe we have like 25 to 50 million users maximum, just based on the numbers of wallets that have been downloaded. And if you look at the statistics of what people actually do right now with crypto, just look at DeppRadar as a website that kind of aggregates information of what are the most used dApps, and it's very clear that blockchain right now serves mostly one or two purposes. One is speculation, so trading. There's a lot of trading happening. Uniswap is the number one application, I think, on Ethereum and Polygon in terms of just usage. And there's some followed by a few NFT platforms, which are also about trading NFTs. And then we have another class of applications that are games. So that also create quite some usage on many platforms. And that's basically it. And I think it's just kind of obvious that there's a limited amount of users that cares about trading and that cares about playing games. I guess games is actually a pretty big user group, but specific blockchain gaming is then again like a niche. And I think the problem also with games is that they are very, like, most of them are pretty like isolated from each other. So you can play one game, but it doesn't create any network effects for other games. So they're all like existing in isolation today, at least. Might also change in the future, but that's how they're played today. So in my view, it's also not necessarily a lack of like scalable blockchains, because actually most blockchains are not even full, right? Like most blockchains have actually, they run like, but they have still like 90% of the block space left. No one's using it. So scalability is not the issue. And I would say also user experience is an issue, but we have a solution to that, which is account abstraction. I think can help a lot in solving pretty much all the user experience issues we are facing right now to get on par with Web 2. So it's not like user experience can be, or like is kind of solved. Scalability is also not the issue. I think the main issue is just building applications that really matter on a daily basis, right? Like things that people really want to use on a daily basis. And that's why I'm shilling my own project. But I think that's why Gnosis Pay is actually very important, because payments is something that you actually do on a daily basis. If you compare like how many blockchain transactions did you do within the last month versus how many payments did you do with your card in the last month, or Apple Pay or whatever you're using, then I guess like there's a big difference. You probably do like 100 times more transactions with your card compared to with your blockchain wallet. And that's why I think it's very important that we get into more of these like day-to-day transactional activities in order to have more utility for the average user. and make those applications so easy accessible that users don't see a compromise in using it in terms of user experience. And then ideally we can open it up to the like the nice world of decentralization and applications that we've been building over the last 10 years. So those can also then benefit from the new users that we have.
Oh, for sure. I think this also ties really well into this next question from Katie, who asks, what are the best fiat on-ramps for Gnosis Chain? And also is adding, do you see this and streaming payments via account abstraction starting to blur the lines with things like cards or fiat payments?
Right. So fiat on-ramps. So there's one that I want to mention, which I think is very exciting. It's called Monerium. And Monerium is today the best way for you to on and off ramp to Euro. So if you're in Europe, don't use Kraken, use Monerium, because it saves you money and time. The way it works is that Monerium effectively creates a bank account for you. It also solves compliance issues, by the way. That's maybe the most important. Because effectively, if you sign up with Monerium, you have a new bank account. You get your own IBAN issued. And when you deposit money into it, it will issue immediately Euro e-tokens on your account on Gnosis Chain. And you can go vice versa. You can send money from your MetaMask account, for example, directly to your bank account, and or like actually to any bank account. And it will come from your IBAN on Monerium, meaning your own account. So no one will ever ask you, like, where does this money come from? Because this account is in your name. Whereas if I withdraw via Kraken, the compliance department in banks usually will ask, okay, Kraken, what did you do there? So that I think is also an advantage, because it is your money. It is e-cash. It is recognized as money. So that is, I think, the most interesting new on-off ramp in Europe. You should just use this because it's by far the cheapest and fastest. There are some on-off ramps, like all the providers like Ramp and others have integrated Gnosis Chain as well. They come at a small cost because there are like credit card fees or like other small fees attached to it. But all of them are integrated, and any of them works. So I would recommend checking maybe multiple of them, because they have different pricing depending how much you want to convert into what currency. You should just use whatever is the cheapest. They all work the same in the end.
Yes. So let's kind of go back to a nice, simple question. If you were joining the space now and wanted to learn one language, what would it be?
Well, in my view, Solidity is still the number one language that gives you all the skills you need in order to write smart contracts that matter. It also has the biggest tooling, so it will definitely give you the biggest flexibility. And that's the number one language, which is also fairly easy to learn. So that's definitely the number one recommendation. In terms of let's say non-smart contract languages, Rust is definitely becoming the number one language in order to write like tooling or dApps as well. That has been on the rise for a very long time. At Gnosis, actually, a couple of years ago, we decided that all our backend is written in Rust, simply because we saw the trend heading in this direction. And if you're asking me for like non-smart contract languages, that would be my recommendation.
Cool. Awesome. And so now a few questions about your own personal preference is in the space. So I've got one question from Yi saying, what is your favorite non-Gnosis ecosystem team or builders at the moment?
Oh, there's so many people building amazing application. I would say in general, I'm very excited about anyone who is trying to bring in new user groups that can benefit from blockchain. I'm personally also supporting like the DeSci movement, so decentralized science. The idea is like, obviously, blockchain and programming in Ethereum, I think, has been so insanely successful because it's an open source movement, and kind of by definition, smart contracts have to be open source to be trusted. And I think that led to the insane innovation that we had over the last couple of years, like in no other industry. And DeSci kind of tries to replicate this for science, where there are also still unnecessary silos of information, and the way how funding works is also not great. And so they try to build DAOs which can benefit from using blockchain for funding, for giving out grants, and to do investments into decentralized science projects. And I think that's something very exciting to see. Specifically, VitaDAO is a good example of that, that tries to foster like longevity research. And that I think is super exciting. Of course, now the AI part is also very exciting. And so, I think there's lots of great stuff happening right now. It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, of course. It's a difficult question to answer. Sorry. I mean, Jane is also asking a similar one. She's asking, because you mentioned Skype earlier, what is your favorite application before Web3? And then do you also have one in Web3?
Oh, before Web3, my God. Like, I was always interested in peer-to-peer applications. And so I mentioned Skype, I think was very revolutionary at the time. Well, for the first time you could do voice over IP calls for free, basically. And I think also like the torrent technology was super interesting to me. I think those were very exciting. Yeah, I mean, there were different communities that were also very interesting, especially like the early days, different like forums for programming. But yeah, I don't know, like it's hard to pick one as well. And in Web3, well, that's even harder. Like it's a good question. I think there's still, generally I'm quite excited still about the impact of DAOs, or like what kind of impact DAOs can bring to coordinate humans and to allow to fund specific initiatives. So any development around this field I think is super exciting. But yeah, I'm also it's hard to pick a winner.
Do you, by any chance, have any favorite gaming projects or any gaming ones that interest you? Because Niraj is asking.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, there are definitely some cool games out there. Ethereum is a good one. It's kind of a conquest game where you have to find allies, and it kind of involves like this on-chain component, but also potentially off-chain if you can identify the other players. So this is a very interesting game to play. I also used to play the Dark Forest game, which was about space exploitation or exploration. That was a fun game to play as well. But yeah, I wish I had more time.
Niraj is asking, can we get the name of the first game again?
Yeah. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. I think it's Ethereum. I write it in the chat. Let me see if I find it.
Sounds great. Okay, so while you're doing that, so we've only got 5 minutes left of this kind of AMA, and I'm slightly overwhelmed by all the questions. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't think we'll be able to answer or go through all of them in this last 5 minutes, but I will pick just a couple to finish off with and try and link some of them together. Cool. So, some interesting questions about kind of Gnosis Chain's reliance, I guess, on Ethereum. I think one person was asking, are you worried about finality shortages? And Alex is also asking about if people from Ethereum are starting to spill over into Gnosis, will that cause a potential fee jump as well in the future?
Yeah, good question. So our beacon chain is has been quite healthy over the last couple of months. So I'm not too concerned about finality of the network. The network runs, just to be clear, fully independent of Ethereum. So there are Gnosis Chain validators and there are Ethereum validators. They're not necessarily the same. Maybe some Ethereum validators run a Gnosis validator in addition on their machine, and that can be the case. But otherwise, the networks are completely independent of each other. The only component is a bridge that is connecting those two networks. And there we are working actually on a very interesting new bridge based on ZK proofs that can prove the consensus of the different networks on the other network, and that will increase security quite significantly. In terms of users coming over to Gnosis Chain, of course it is happening, but at a moderate rate. So right now also, Gnosis Chain has double the capacity in terms of block space compared to Ethereum. At least it's very easy to get there. So it will take some time until we see fees going up. In theory, of course, this could happen. That would be a good sign of success for Gnosis Chain, obviously. There's such high demand that the fees will also go up. We have not solved the general problem of scalability in the sense that it is still following exactly the same principles of Ethereum. That being said, we already have layer 2s operating on top of Gnosis Chain. So we also are quite familiar with how this infrastructure can be run. And some of the applications just make more sense on a layer 2. So for example, Gnosis Pay itself is running as a layer 2 on Gnosis Chain even today in testnet mode. And the game this game Dark Forest that I mentioned before was also operating on a layer 2 of Gnosis Chain because at the time it was run on the mainnet. It actually consumed, I think, 80% of the box space. So there's some applications which obviously should rather move a layer up, and there we are following exactly the same strategy as Ethereum itself.
Yeah, awesome. Mikhail asks, what are some noteworthy applications or emerging trends that you observe in the intersection of blockchain and the healthcare industry?
But I have to say I'm really not an expert in healthcare. Good question. I mean, I see that like some of the tracking is kind of combined with blockchain. Like generally, I think the idea is that healthcare data should be private data. So I know there's some companies working on this, having your ID on chain, but having your healthcare data protected. But being possible, making it possible to make it accessible to other services, and you can even use ZK proofs for this to prove that you have kind of without revealing a concrete data point. You can say that you're in the range of a data or in the range of values, which is okay for whatever purpose. That I think is interesting. Then I guess I mentioned VitaDAO before. In the area of science, I think there will be more and more overlaps. And I think also, especially, I would say companies or research funded via Web3 is more likely to also understand the other benefits of Web3 and will take advantage of it. So yeah, there's also another project called LabDAO. They try to commoditize laboratories, and that is also on chain. So you can kind of have a marketplace where different labs can offer certain services, and then you can kind of on-chain define of how the flow of operation should be, and also charge for it. So those kind of innovations I'm seeing, but I'm not an expert.
No worries. I think if this is the Mikhail that I think it is, I think Mikhail was exploring a project to do with the healthcare industry and potentially deploying on Gnosis Chain. So that's pretty cool.
You learn more about it.
Yeah. Great. So I think, yeah, this is time. I've really pushed us right up until the end minute here because we've had so many awesome questions come in, and it's been a real pleasure to have you, Stefan, again. I guess last question from me is, if people want to get in touch with you or get involved or more involved in Gnosis Chain, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, good question. So you can directly ping me on Twitter, actually. Stefan George is the handle. You can also join our Discord. You can join the Gnosis Chain or Gnosis DAO Discord. We also have a forum.gnosis.io, where like everyone's welcome to make proposals or discuss what we should do next. I think those are the best channels.
Awesome. I've just put your Twitter in the chat, so everyone, you can go follow Stefan there. Also going to share my own Twitter, just if you want to keep up to date with what Encode is doing and any of the other cool things that are going on. But yeah, I think I'll close up there. Thank you so much, Stefan, for coming and speaking with us again. Always a delight, and I hope you come back and speak with us again, because I really think an hour is not enough to go through all of the questions. Like, I'm so sorry, guys, for missing out those questions. But again, ping Stefan on Twitter or something. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. All right. See you guys.
Bye.